Okay, so I was in the RNT community, and there was a bunch of questions around should you get your stool examined to enable you to pick the right foods, understand what's going on with your gut microbiome, understand what's going on inside and the things that you might not be able to see. Um, and yeah, there's quite a few people asking questions. Obviously, it's especially in the UK. I don't know what it's like in Australia or in America, but in the UK, there's a lot of marketing at the moment around getting your poop examined to then
Mm.
build a personalized nutrition plan accordingly for your gut microbiome, etc. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
So I noticed this trend pop up every couple of years. There's always something similar to this that is always taking the public by storm, right? And yeah, I don't see any validity in this for literally anyone who doesn't have an actual gastrointestinal disorder that has been diagnosed by your actual general practitioner or gastroenterologist. I think a lot of this stuff stems from, if I can improve my gut health, if I can fix my gut health, I'll lose weight. This is the number one motivator that I see people wanting to fix their gut health. It's not because I want to feel better, I want to have more energy. Fundamentally, in their mind, this is the way I see it. I want to fix my gut health so I can lose more weight and lose more body fat because it's my gut health that is the limiting factor from me not being able to lose body fat. And I'm going to go get this test done. And I'm going to be like, oh, look how much attention these people are paying to my microbiome. They understand that I digest and process foods differently. They're going to give me this individualized plan, foods that work for me. So you're already getting a lot of this buy-in because, again, we don't expect people to understand what actually goes on here. We don't expect them to understand the ins and outs of biology, but just with a quick search on PubMed through microbiome stuff, you can see that even if you were to get your stool tested, all you are testing is one small portion of your bowel. Okay. We have bacteria that goes all the way up through the large intestine, predominantly in the large intestine, but there's also some in the small intestine as well. So you are not even getting a full description of your microbiome or what have you. All you're getting is the stuff that you're excreting and pooping out. So that's not even giving you the full story of what's happening in your microbiome. And even if you did know that information, practically, it just doesn't do anything differently. Like at the end of the day, all these tests, what are they going to tell you? Hey, Akash, eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more fiber, minimize processed foods because processed foods probably mess up your gut microbiome. Oh, thank you. I didn't know that prior. I didn't know that eating a donut is going to, mess up my microbiome. Thanks for that. So even if you were to get these tests done, the way I see it, the practical advice is always going to be the same. It's going to be minimize processed food, eat more whole foods, be more active, drink more water, all the things that are going to improve your health and body composition in general are also going to be good for your gut. So this is the problem that I see with so many people looking for, again, a magic bullet, thinking that it's this one thing. As long as I know what foods to feed my microbes, then I'm going to get the results that I want. And that's what really grinds my gears.
Well, do you think potentially the how getting the buy-in is, yes, that's a key part of it, but is that potentially a really good thing for people who then embark on such a program or regimen where they've got the buy-in, knowing that they're fueling their microbiome in the way that their microbiome should be fueled, so they get potentially better results?
Yes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think, again, placebo is extremely strong. I also think this is why a lot of supplements can work. When people spend a lot of money on supplements, maybe by default, they'll start eating better. They'll start sleeping better. They'll start doing the actual things that get them the result. So I would never, ever downplay buy-in, but I just don't want people to go down these rabbit holes and, waste a lot of money, waste a lot of time thinking that they need to, eliminate certain foods for the rest of their life, thinking that they can't eat these foods ever again. And then when they do eat those foods, they sort of placebo themselves into thinking, oh, I'm having a gut reaction. That's why my digestion's off. Like I was reading some articles with regards to gluten. This was happened a couple of years ago where there were these people who thought they were sensitive to gluten and people who didn't, or what have you. And the researchers fed these people who said they were claiming to be sensitive to gluten, and they gave them foods. They were like, hey, this is gluten free, blah blah, what have you. And these foods did actually contain gluten, but because the people thought that these foods didn't have gluten, they had no response. They had no response. And then after the researchers told them, then they started to get these symptoms. So I think we can never underestimate the power of the mind when it comes to this type of thing as well. And if you believe that a food is going to cause you distress, if you believe that it's your gut microbiome causing you problems, then you're gonna fulfill that prophecy.
Yeah.
So it can go one of both ways. But I don't think there's anything wrong with buy-in. I just think it's important to understand why something is working, and not to get confused with correlation and causation.
So if we know it's there's a difference between causation and correlation, how do if you're listening to this and trying to decipher between what's real and what's not real, how do you apply the right lens onto it? Because the companies or various companies that are promoting this, they've got a very heavy marketing budget. And when you've got a very heavy marketing budget, you can see it all the time. You've got influencers talking about it, you've got celebrities talking about it, and that can make you feel, shit, I need to do this. What are some of the lenses you need to apply when looking through some of the claims?
I think it's really difficult, to be honest. Like, unless you have a background in this field, and or you're part of a company like us who has a team who's really into this type of thing, it can be very tricky to differentiate between reality and hype, because unless you have a fundamental understanding of mechanisms of how things work, I can't expect someone to know, or to know what's the right lens I should be looking through. I think a lot of the marketing and a lot of the information they put out, because a lot of the information is true and it's factual, and it's like, yes, your gut microbiome can contribute to your health immensely. Having a diverse gut microbiome is beneficial. Yes, highly processed foods will impact your gut bacteria in a negative way. Not getting enough sleep, not getting enough exercise, all these things are all factual. But I think going about using those facts in a way that gets you to fork out additional money or additional resources to give you a test that doesn't really practically change anything, I think is disingenuous. And I think it's taking advantage of people's gullibility. And I think anything that is asking you to do this test, or go get blood work done, or go get whatever, and the company's not actually registered, or from memory, some of these companies are selling things that are not even FDA approved, from memory. I'm not going to name companies, but again, a lot of the stuff that they are promoting and selling just isn't valid. And I don't really have a concrete answer for how people should look at this type of stuff. The way I see it, though, is if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think if people are also trying to tell you this is the new way to do things, new research is showing this, everything you've been told about calories is wrong, that type of language, I think, should be a bit of a not a no-brainer, but that should make you go, oh, what's going on here? Because a lot of these places and companies, they are trying to, tell you calorie counting doesn't work for fat loss. It hasn't been proven in any studies. Yes, it has. The only way to keep weight off over the long term is through calorie control. Now, whether you count calories or not is irrelevant. But to come out with statements like calories don't matter, we don't count calories and so shouldn't you. I think all this stuff can be very appealing to the person who's scrolling and who maybe has like, oh yeah, I've tried calorie counting. Yeah, it doesn't work. These people know exactly what they're talking about. Give me your test. Show me. Tell me that my gut microbiome is damaged. And then I'll buy all your stuff.
Is there any scenario where calories don't matter?
Yes, if you're not trying to lose weight. I think it's one of those things. It's like that they will always matter when it comes to body composition. It's just how you go about reducing them or increasing them. That's where the differentiation comes from. Like you can never, to say that they don't matter at all is just lying. And I think maybe it's just trying to get eyes on you, which is a great way to get people to look at your stuff. But then when you actually read the fine print and you read what they actually say, they are admitting that calories do matter. They are just saying it's hard to track them and it's hard to count them and it's hard to stay in a deficit because of your food choices. So this is where they try to now differentiate between calorie counters. It's either you count calories or you focus on quality food. Why not do both? That is exactly what we do here. We focus on food quality because focusing on food quality allows you to stay in a calorie deficit a lot easier. But that's not us saying that calories don't matter. Of course they do. But I think it's the way it's being communicated that is making people think, oh, yeah, no, I don't need to track calories. All I need to do is focus on food quality. I just need to wear a continuous blood glucose monitor and send my stool sample to all these people, and they'll tell me the magic diet that I need for me, because I'm a snowflake, on how to lose weight without counting calories. How good is that? How good does that sound?
Yeah. When it comes to like not counting calories and you're focusing on quality food only, how does that actually work in the real world? Because I've never seen that actually produce genuine body composition results that make a difference. I think in severely overweight people, it can help because you're going from, just garbage food to better food, and naturally you'll drop calories. But I think if you're not in the severely obese range, I think it's very difficult to get some genuine results because you can be eating quality food at a restaurant, but hammering 1,500, 2,000 calories of it in one go.
Easily. Now, is it much harder to overeat quality food if you're preparing it yourself? Yeah, for sure. I would say so. Like, it's very, very hard to overeat vegetables and chicken breast and whatever. It's very hard to overconsume that type of thing. Okay, very easy to overconsume pizza, pastas, donuts, all that type of stuff. But this is, again, to say that calories don't matter, or to say, I think if people adopted a diet that focused on high quality foods, as you said earlier, they could naturally put themselves in a bit of a deficit. And then all of a sudden, we get this from our members all the time. I can't eat all this food. I've never eaten all this food, so much food in my life, but I'm dropping weight. It's like, yeah, but because your calories are in check, now you're actually dropping the weight, and people will feel full for so long, even though they're in a relatively steep deficit, right? So I think that's a really good example of how focusing on quality foods can accidentally put you in a calorie deficit, right? So, but that's not to say that calories don't matter. Of course they do. It's just much harder to overeat. Yeah, as I said earlier, massive salad, chicken breast, you eat that, you're like, I'm done. I don't want to eat more of that. So yeah, I think a focus on quality food for most people will get them moving in the right direction. But there's going to come a point where you're going to have to track these calories, and then it's like, oh, but no, calorie labels are wrong and they can be 30% off. And, I'm not going to say any names or whatnot, but I was just trying to look at evidence to the contrary to what we speak about. And the argument for why calories don't work was, this person was citing research of how they had two groups. One group ate a ultra processed diet, and one group ate 2,500 calories of an ultra processed diet and 2,500 calories of a whole foods diet. And the people who were eating the ultra processed food diet, after they ate, they went up and had 300 to 400 more calories. That was the argument. And he goes, see, calorie counting doesn't work because eating processed foods makes you eat more food. Okay, so you're admitting that the reason that they didn't lose weight was because they ate more. If they were both calorie matched, I don't care if your food comes from salmon or from the Himalayas, or if it comes from a factory. You're going to lose weight. The Twinkie diet guy proved this as well. Now, is that the best way to go about it? No, I would say no. I think you're going to do yourself a massive disservice if all you ate was just whey protein and chocolate. It's not going to work. We've done the if it fits your macros whole escapade. But to say that, to make that as your argument as to why calories don't work is just like, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, eating an ultra processed diet makes you want to eat more food, which ultimately leads to eating more calories. So you eat more. That's why you're not losing the weight. It's not the processed food per se. It's what it does to your ability to regulate your hunger and appetite. That is the issue, which is a different story altogether.
Yeah, and then that's obviously linked to the society element, but also potentially other stuff. But if you're leaning towards those foods, they may be sources of comfort, etc. But that's a whole different discussion that we'll probably come on to. If we stick
That's
on
a different
this,
animal.
yeah, it's a different animal, and probably the real animal to tackle, which is emotional eating. But if we stick on
Great.
sort of the topic of fads, where we've got um, well, calories don't matter. We've got claims around personalization to your biology. Let's discuss the use of stool tests and when does a stool test actually need to happen? Is there any benefit at all? Is there value for people? When would someone's digestion actually inhibit them improving their health and wellness?
Mm. Yeah. Well, again, this is something that you're gonna have to speak to your actual gastroenterologist about, because if you've got really watery stools, if you're constipated a lot of the time, all these bowel issues that are not common and they're not healthy. You would know if your bowels are healthy or not just by how many times you're going to the bathroom each day. Like, what's the consistency of your stools? If it's like completely watery all the time, okay, you could have a bug, you could have something going on in there, and you've got to go get that checked out. That is when stool tests can be helpful, because that could be something could be going on that you need to get looked at. But it's going to be referred and recommended by actual medical professional, not just someone claiming to be like, hey, we can tell you what you should be eating based on the little stool sample that you send us in the mail. So I think if people are having like serious digestive issues, that is the time to go. And you will know this, painful bowel movements, blood in the stool, all that type of stuff. Okay, you need to get something looked at.
Yeah. So when to get a stool test is going to come down to just how severe your actual digestive symptoms are. If you have blood in the stool, if you've got really watery stool consistently, if it's a change in bowel habits, and these things haven't been fixed by nutrition or lifestyle, then yeah, maybe a stool test could be viable. But I think a lot of people are leaving a lot of low-hanging fruit on the table when it comes to digestion. I think a lot of people overcomplicate digestion. They don't understand how many other factors influence it that go far beyond just food. How you sleep, how active you are, how much water you drink, how much sunlight you get. All these things can impact your digestion far more than you think, So unless all those ducks are in a row, there is no need for you to go get a stool test. There's no need for you to seek out additional gut health things. Like, I think if you're doing those things, you're literally 95% of the way there when it comes to gut health. So outside of like severe medical conditions, or if you've been on like a trip and you may have got a bug or something like that, the validity of stool tests as of now are just zero. They're not going to improve what you do practically right now. So I wouldn't recommend them to anyone.
Yeah. I had some like digestive issues maybe like 10 years ago, maybe slightly less. And I think it was basically there's certain foods that just don't agree with me. I think we all have like the odd food that just doesn't agree with me. And I was eating a lot of those. I wasn't saying, at one point I thought I was gluten intolerant. And I realized I wasn't gluten intolerant. I was that, that sample size that you mentioned, I was that person where for years I thought I was gluten intolerant. Then someone gave it to me. And after it's like, do you realize it's not gluten free? I was like, So since that changed my life, like being part of that accident. But I had general like gut issues. They usually linked to like bad protein powders I was having, cheap, just shitty quality food that was going into my system. And one thing I learned in that whole period was the power of just being very aware of how your body responds to different foods. And I think you can get a lot of the benefits of a lot of what these tests do by just simply being aware of how you feel after certain foods. Like, I will know certain things even now just won't digest that well. Whether you see it on the other side, which I don't know if that what the reason of that is. Potentially, is that undigested, or is that an issue with digestion?
What if you see food in the stool? Is that undigested food? Yeah. Well, some plant matter simply isn't completely broken down, right? So insoluble fiber won't completely be broken down. That's why you'll see little bits of food in your stool, which is nothing to be alarmed about. It's just part of the package as it goes through. So nothing to be concerned about.
So that's good. But I realized when I was younger, like there were certain foods, I just didn't feel as good as this. And it's not that I felt in a way of, I need to go get checked out because I was having watery stools. It's more just maybe didn't feel as good as this other food did. Like, for example, I know even now rice has digests so much better for me than potatoes. So just when I have that much potato, not that I'll have any issues when I have potato, but I just know I feel really good when I have rice. So I think one of the benefits of like just being more aware of the foods you are eating, and this really comes down to, for what we have is the investment phase where you experiment with more different foods, experiment with different meals. You can start to understand what makes foods make you feel good and make you perform good and ultimately make you look good. And that can sort of bypass any potential intolerance tests or allergies tests or even just stool sample tests that you may otherwise be thinking of doing.
100% agree. And I think what you just said before, paying attention, being aware, that also ties into being mindful when you're actually eating your food, right? Like we were guilty of this being PTs on the gym floor, scoffing food between clients, this and that, like not actually taking the time to sit and chew your food down to digest it. Like it's still such an overlooked component of digestion. People just, quaffing their food down, right? So these things are what you should be looking at first before thinking you need to go, again, do a stool test. Are you actually chewing your food? Are you leaving enough time between your meals as well? And another thing, and I sometimes get this, especially on super active days. So I find that there's this sweet spot where a good amount of activity is really good for digestion, but just like with anything, a lot of activity in one day can also hinder digestion in a negative way. Why? Because you have more of your blood is going to your extremities, right? To fuel your activity and your training. So I'll always feel on those heavier days, no matter, again, I'll put in certain strategies such as maybe not having as much fiber on those days and making sure that my training window is made up of easy to digest proteins or easy to digest carbs, stuff like that. And that all helps. But fundamentally, when you're doing a lot of activity on certain days, digestion is just going to be a bit shitty on those days. And just accepting and being like, okay, it is what it is on these days, and that is fine. That's, I think, a much better approach than being like, oh my God, I need to go see a stool. I understand a stool test. This is not right. I feel horrible, because there are other days that it feels really great, And I think it's also important to understand that like every day doesn't need to be perfect. No day is ever going to be perfect. Every single day my digestion is just spot on. It's just not the case. And maybe thinking that just because you're releasing a bit of gas or what have you, think that's bad. It's like no, that's normal. Like farting a little bit is completely fine. It doesn't mean that your digestion is off or anything like that. It's more just I think people are very sensitive to these things. People think that I have a little bit of bloating or have a little bit of gas, I have digestive issues. It's like, not really, being a vegan now, AV, I'm sure the amount of volume that you're eating now, some days you're like, whoa, a little bit gassy today, and that's completely normal because of how much food volume that you're consuming now. Does that mean that you have to go get a gut test because of XYZ? I would say no. It's just part of being a normal fermenting human.
Fermenting human. I like that. So before we move on to, I think we want to touch on glucose monitors. If we were to close off the gut chapter, what are if we go nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle, like 3 key pillars, what are the things you want to be focusing on in each? If we go 5 key things to maximize your gut health without needing to send your poop to anyone, what would they be? Let's start with nutrition. What are the key things to tick off?
Definitely want to be focusing on a plant-based diet. This doesn't mean you have to be vegan or vegetarian. It's just that you should have a good amount of plants in your diet. The more variety, the better. I think there's some recommendations of up to 25 to 30 different plants throughout the week. I don't think you have to go to that extreme. I think there's a lot of validity in keeping things relatively the same, but the message is more diversity, the better when it comes to your plants. So this is why I like mixing up vegetables for a lot of people. Minimizing fat intake, especially saturated fat. High saturated fat intake has been shown to disturb the gut microbiota. So keeping fat at a good level. Keeping your meals spaced out evenly across the day. I think this is a big one. I think leaving at least 4 to 5 hours apart, 3 to 4 hours between main meals, I think is a really good rule of thumb. Try to minimize snacking in between these meals. I think that could be really good. Not eating too late. You don't want to go to bed with a heavy stomach. I think if you can cap your eating 1 to 2 hours before bed, I think that's going to be really, really good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for nutrition. Load up on fiber, eat a lot of plants. Don't eat too late to close to bedtime. Space your meals out. That's 4.
Yeah, minimize ultra processed. Minimize ultra processed
foods.
Moderate caffeine. Probably don't go too
Smash the diet sodas. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Be careful on the caffeines. And
yes,
then
that's true.
If we switch gears to exercise, couple key points.
Exercise, I think walk as much as you can. Walking seems to be the best way to get things moving, especially if you feel like you're a bit backed up. Walking is gentle enough that it's not going to restrict blood flow to your gastrointestinal system, and it's going to get those muscles around the midsection actually contracting in a way that moves things along. So walking can be great, especially after meals if you can do that. Understand that if around intense training days or intense training sessions, try to keep fiber intake relatively low just to keep digestion in a good spot. You don't want to be, again, understand that really, really heavy sessions can make your digestion go a little bit off every now and then. Nothing to worry about. Keep lifting. Again, don't go too hard, don't go too soft. You'll be all right. Be active. It's probably the best thing you can do for digestion.
Amazing. And lifestyle.
Lifestyle. Do not neglect your sleep. Sleep is literally the ultimate thing when it comes to anything, especially digestion, because you need to understand that sleeping sets your circadian rhythm. Your gastrointestinal system runs on a circadian rhythm and a circadian clock. So when that is all synced up nicely, things just move along very, very nicely as well. So sleep, making sure you get some sunlight if possible throughout the day. Stress management is massive. Stress can impede digestion by a large amount. So the more you can chill out, relax, get some downtime, the better off you're going to be, not just from a digestive standpoint, but just be a better person as well.
I think stress is a real underrated hack for digestion and managing that stress. I've noticed if I'm feeling more stressed than normal, my digestion isn't as good. It's a direct correlation. I think a lot of people's probably digestive issues stem from that more than anything. Whether that's stress from bad quality foods and nutrition, or stress from life events, or life just stresses or work or family relationships, etc. I think that's kind of a massive impact on your digestion and what you see on the other side.
Huge. And just to be a little bit nerdy, especially when it comes to like protein digestion as well. So the acid in your stomach actually reduces by quite a bit when you are very stressed out, making it harder to break down food. So yeah, definitely a lot to that.
If we shift gears now from gut health and digestion to another growing trend, which is blood glucose monitors and the supposed requirement or benefit of tracking your blood glucose all throughout the day. Well, what's the deal with this?
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things that has taken a grain of truth or like something that is correlated to fat loss and weight loss and trying to use that as the main metric to track things, right? So people assume that just because they are measuring their blood glucose and they're seeing spikes throughout the day, that all of a sudden this means that they are not losing body fat or they shouldn't be eating certain foods, this and that. And at the end of the day, I think people are just focusing on the wrong things. Just because your blood glucose goes up after a meal doesn't mean that's a bad thing. You know, you remember it's meant to go up after a meal, which is okay. Now, yeah, if something makes your blood glucose go super high, okay, maybe that's something you need to pay attention to. But when has a salad ever made someone's blood glucose shoot up like crazy? Do you really need, this goes back to the whole gut testing thing, do you need a glucose monitor to tell you that eating 10 donuts is going to spike your blood sugar and cause a lot of issues? You probably don't need that. You probably already know, okay, I probably shouldn't be eating that, you know? And then people would make the argument, but if I have a certain fruit, or, I had this one friend who ate sweet potato and their blood sugar went up. isn't sweet potato meant to be like a healthy food, this and that? And I think people get caught up in seeing their blood sugar go up, thinking that that's automatically a bad thing. And I think these transient like increases in blood sugar, they don't mean anything, especially if it just comes back down within a couple hours or what have you. It doesn't really matter. And I think, again, people are focusing on these metrics, thinking that that's going to be the answer. But it really isn't, because we know that, as we said earlier, calories matter the most when it comes to fat loss. So even if you were to eat a very high carbohydrate rich diet, you're going to see these blood glucose spikes throughout the day. You're going to see them. And if you're tracking that and you're fearing them, you're like, oh, this diet is not working. My blood glucose is up through the roof. I'm like, okay, well, are you losing body fat? Oh yeah, I actually am. Okay, well then those things don't matter. Now, on the flip side, if you were just to aiming to keep your blood sugar as stable as possible, and all you ate was just fats, because fats are not going to raise your blood sugar. So you'll see that. You'll be like, oh, look how my blood glucose is staying stable. Yeah, but you're overeating every single day, right? Which over the long term ends up being far worse for your metabolic health in general. So this is where people, again, they try to gamify this whole thing, trying to minimize blood glucose spikes, when in fact they are focusing on the wrong metric. And also, because I did this stuff back in the day as well, fundamentally, just being lean, having less body fat on you, having more muscle mass on you, is like the best thing that you can do for your blood glucose anyway. Because when you have relatively small amounts of body fat, decent amount of muscle mass, doesn't matter what your blood sugar is doing throughout the day, your body can deal with it. And that's what you want to be aiming for, okay? You want to be aiming for getting leaner. That should be the goal, not can I make my blood glucose spike minimally? That shouldn't be the goal. Now, can it maybe allow people to bring some awareness to their diet? Maybe, but as I said earlier, you don't need a glucose monitor to tell you to not eat 10 donuts or to not have like 10 drinks at night. Oh, my blood glucose went up when I had like 10 pints of alcohol. No shit. You know, so I think all the information that it's giving you, I just don't think it's relevant. And I think it can also, paralysis by analysis can be massive here as well. Again, focusing on the wrong metric, inducing a lot of fear into people when it comes to food. You know what I mean? Oh, I had a banana, my blood sugar spiked, never having banana again. It's like, what? What do you mean? I think it fuels the wrong thing. And I think it gets people to focus on the wrong thing too. You know, and as I said earlier, just getting leaner and having less body fat on you is going to improve your blood glucose control more than anything, you know, and that's what people should be focusing on. But again, they're focusing on these numbers.
Yeah, I remember I fell for all of this. I mean, like you said at the beginning, these things come in waves every couple of years. I remember 10 years ago, I was putting cinnamon in all my food, apple cider vinegar after every single meal.
Glucose disposal agents.
I was taking glucose disposal agents. There was one time I was on holiday with the friends and I was having dessert and I forgot my omega-3s. So, you know, we're in the hotel restaurant. I had to run back to my hotel room, grab the omega-3s, minimize my blood sugar spike as soon as possible. And, you know, order was resumed afterwards because I was trying to avoid any sort of spike. So it was low carb. And if they were carbs, I was using every sort of disposable agent, whether it's through supplements or whether through supposed natural means, to blunt it, because I was scared of insulin spikes and blood sugar.
Yeah.
Until I realized it. Yeah, because I thought, if you think on a very micro scale, our insulin's a storage hormone. So if you have blood glucose swimming around your bloodstream and you have insulin spiked up, you're going to store more body fat. And that was like the very, very simplified way of saying it. But that was it. That was all I needed to hear and think, right, I don't want any of that. So let's get all that out of the way.
Yeah. And I think, again, it comes back down to if you don't understand the mechanisms and you don't understand the fundamentals, those numbers can scare you. Seeing your blood glucose go up, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be a diabetic. Or then now trying to use that information to give you a personalized diet, which is what I love. You know, the thing is, though, what we got to realize is that there are other things that affect your blood sugar outside of food. So let's just say you get your perfectly personalized nutrition plan from whatever company telling you this is what you should eat based on your blood glucose. What if the night before you had 3 hours of sleep because your newborn was up all night? Now you can eat these perfectly blood glucose personalized meals
and you'll see a massive spike in blood glucose. So oh, what's going on here? I thought this was supposed to be personalized to me. Well, it is. Well, they claim to be, but because you had these other factors in your life contribute to your blood sugar increasing, then how are you meant to track all this? How are you meant to keep tabs on all this, right? This is what I mean. Like, this is just giving you information that you cannot practically use. We know that if you're not sleeping sufficiently, you're going to have the blood glucose regulation of a type 2 diabetic. You know, it can increase by 40% by, 4 to 5 hours of sleep. That's pretty crazy. 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep can put your blood glucose regulation skills in the toilet. Okay, so there's that, there's stress, there's hydration. All these other things can impact how well you manage blood glucose on a day-to-day basis. So imagine just thinking that, oh, fantastic, I've got a personalized meal plan now. And then you have a poor night's sleep, and no matter what you do, you're still going to see these surges, even though that same meal a couple of days ago had no surges or what have you, even though those surges don't mean shit. Like, if you be in a deficit, and those surges will literally mean nothing. No matter how high your blood glucose goes, if you're in an energy deficit throughout the whole day, you're still going to end up in a better spot 3, 6, 9 months down the line.
Why do they not matter on a micro scale? Because a lot of this marketing and stuff that we used to do back in the day is because of the micro reasons. We don't want to spike it. Why does it not matter on a micro basis?
Because the body is very good at regulating itself when it comes to these things, right? So if we understand energy balance, we know that, okay, as long as I'm in a deficit, it doesn't really matter what happens to my blood glucose, because over time it's going to be in a good spot. I'm burning more energy than I'm storing, right? So these now, again, can it be a case for, okay, could we manage blood glucose better to manage appetite and satiety? Yeah, I think there could be something there. If you eat a meal that is going to spike your blood sugar crazy high and then drop it super quick, then yeah, you may want to fix that. But when has anyone ever had a protein, fiber-rich meal with a decent amount of healthy fats and some carbohydrates? When has that ever made someone's blood glucose go up like crazy and then straight down and cause a crash? It never has, right? So again, this is where, okay, the practical, maybe there could be some differences between how someone responds to a banana or some fruit, but fundamentally, if your meal composition is still made up of fiber, healthy fats, some protein, which is, again, just part of a healthy diet, your blood glucose excursion or what have you, it just doesn't matter. Like, it's literally going to go up a little bit and then trickle down, what have you. Like, how much variation is there going to be? So it all comes back down to just implementing the same behavior. This is the same behavior that we would give for someone who's got a microbiome issue. Oh, eat more fiber, have more protein, like the message still remains the same. So yeah, I just don't know why people get caught up in these things, that they just love the paralysis by analysis. They love focusing on the things that don't actually make a difference, because it's easier to do that. It's easier to look at your blood glucose versus to not emotionally eat and stay in a deficit for months on end. That's hard. That's hard. I'd much rather look at my little blood glucose monitor.
Well, there was another theory, I think, around like someone saying the number one way to stop a blood sugar spike is to enjoy all your sweets and desserts after you have a full meal. And the reason is because the full meal it's already had the protein, the fats, the fiber included. So you'll stop your natural spikes. That's when you should get your desserts in. But again, the whole thing is predicated, the whole theory of eating is predicated on, trying to minimize your spikes in the day. And that's the reason why you haven't lost weight.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can mitigate your spikes by just doing that strategy just then, which is, that could technically work on paper, but over the course of the day, you're still going to be in an energy surplus if you go overboard, regardless of, and again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. If all you ate was just a high amount of fat throughout the whole day, okay, well, then your blood glucose will stay pretty much flat, but you're going to be gaining body fat, right? Which we know over the long term is bad for your blood glucose regulation. It all just comes down to being lean, being jacked, eating more fiber, eating more protein. Everything else is literally just
noise,
secondary by a mile.
Yeah.
Literally, all of it's noise. It's all noise to get you to stop focusing on what you need to actually do.
So if we look on that micro scale again, this was triggered yesterday on the weekend. I was at on Saturday I was at a family event, and one of my relatives was like, "Oh, we've got honey or maple syrup." They made some like homemade pancakes, and they were like, "Oh yeah, should we have honey or maple syrup?" And someone said, "Oh no, we should go for." They picked one of them. I think it was honey. So I go for honey because the sugar quality is better, so it causes less of a spike. It's something along those lines. And they were like, "Oh, what do you think, Akash?" And I was like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Like, you just pick one of them. Like, it's not going to make a difference. Just whichever one you like the taste of, just go with that."
Yeah. What do you like?
So then I was like, they're like, "Oh, but isn't it about like glycemic index?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that stuff doesn't really matter because if you eat with a meal, it's not going to make a difference." But what's the deal with glycemic? Because that's usually the thing of like, oh, white bread versus brown bread, white bread versus sourdough bread, white rice, brown rice. Which one should you have? Again, is it looking at mechanistic things and thinking mechanistic micro analysis and thinking that applies on the macro?
Agreed. Yeah. It's seeing like, okay, cool. If I have this food in isolation, which is key, this is what happens to my blood glucose. When has anyone ever sliced a bread just like that? And then does it cause a high increase in blood glucose? For sure. But it's all going to, I think something that these things we never talk about is the actual portions. Like the glycemic load as well makes a huge difference too, So for example, okay, if I gave you 100 calories worth of white bread alone, but I gave you 2,000 calories of salmon, rice, veggies, what have you, like, which one is going to spike your blood glucose more? I'll say the white bread is going to spike it higher. But if you've just eaten 2,000 calories versus 100 calories, what's going to mess you up over the long term? What's going to mess up your results more? It's the fact that you ate 2,000 calories, right? So again, this is where people confuse. They don't see the full picture. And when it comes to glycemic index in general, as long as these foods that are potentially high GI, what have you, as long as you are mixing them with protein, with fiber, with healthy fats, like a normal meal that we would encourage, you have nothing to worry about there, And I think this is huge. Whenever we give rice to someone in their plan, they're like, "Oh, do you mean brown rice?" It's like, no. You go with the white rice. Doesn't matter. Whatever you enjoy eating, right? And they're like, "But what about the glucose spike?" And I'm like, no, you don't have to worry about it too much. It's more about your total carb intake. It's about everything else in your diet. Those things matter far more than specific foods, especially when they are in a mixed meal. I was saying people should worry too much about those things. Again, it's missing the forest for the trees.
Okay, so on this trend of micro, macro, which I think it's a really cool topic to go on, because one of the areas I think a lot of people struggle with is scale weight fluctuation. The idea of your scale weight in the micro versus the scale weight over trends. Why these fluctuations happen? Is it a case of if you eat a meal a little bit later, your weight goes up slightly, that means you're off track, or is it a case of just riding the wave out? What's too micro and what's too macro when it comes to results and measuring progress and deciding if something needs to change?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and something that we get a lot is scale weight fluctuations, and they really can mess with people's heads because they think that fat loss is this direct input output sort of thing. Like, I do X activity on Monday, therefore my weight should be this on Tuesday. Ipso facto, perfect calculator. Unfortunately, that's just not how our bodies work. It's not how the metabolism works. And this is why we do look at overall trends as well as average weight for the week, for example, So for some people, you may be doing everything right and absolutely nailing it, and you may not see a bit of movement on the scale for a few days or what have you, maybe even like a whole 5-6 days. I know when I'm pushing the envelope from fat loss, I may not get much shift for a good 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden, massive drop overnight. And then that's my new baseline, right? Now, again, that's going to vary from person to person. But if I was to freak out during those 4 or 5 days and be like, need to make a change, I didn't need to make a change. It just took a while for the fat loss to actually show up on the scale. So I think this is where it's so helpful having an objective third eye who knows what they're looking at, knows what they're doing when it comes to understanding physiology and understanding how the body works to keep you in check. Because without that, I think it can be very easy to be like, you don't see the scale move for like 1 or 2 days. You're like, I want to increase steps, add cardio. That's what I need to do because my weight's not moving. It's like, no. You need to understand that the plans that been given to you, especially by us, like we know that this is sufficient to get fat loss moving at the rate that we want. And again, we take all the guesswork out, which is fantastic for our members. But even then, they still freak out, and I'll still get some of the check-ins to be like, "Oh, nothing's happening. Midweek, nothing's happening. Should we make a change?" I'm like, "No. Just hang on, okay? Trust me, you're definitely in a deficit if you are nailing everything, So it's just important to be patient and to understand that sometimes these things take time to show up, right? So this is why I don't like making changes midweek or doing it. I think you have to wait a whole week to see how the body responds. And even then, sometimes it can be worthwhile holding on because, for example, if a woman is at the end of her cycle, okay, she may be putting in all this effort, doing all the right things, but her scale weight hasn't budged for a good 4 or 5 days. Maybe it's even gone up. Okay, well, this has nothing to do with their plans. It's just because it's time of the month and she's just not going to see her results yet. But even during that time, as long as she's being adherent, she's still losing body fat. It's just not showing up on the scale yet. And this is what I try to tell all of the members who are struggling with scale weight fluctuations. It's like, if you are nailing the process 100% and you are legitimately doing this, weighing everything, tracking everything, doing what is required, you will get the result. It just may not show up tomorrow or the day after. And you have to be patient. Just if you know that you're doing the work, it's only a matter of time when the results show up. So it's knowing how to be patient and understanding that just because you did X amount of steps, or I did my cardio today, why aren't I lighter tomorrow? It's just not how the body works. Just to give you guys some reference, on the days that I do the most activity, so I'm doing like a 3-hour bike ride, I'm going to the gym, whatever, expending 4,000 plus calories on that day. The following day, I'm always heavier. I'm always heavier, but maybe half a kilo or a kilo. Always. Okay. Even if I eat the same amount of food that I would on like a normal day. And the reason for that is because potentially water retention, potentially the digestive stuff that I was talking about earlier. Okay. All these things can impact that, transient scale weight, right? So I know even though I expended 4.5, potentially 5,000 calories in that day, I should be so much lighter the following day. No, it takes a couple of days for my efforts to show up on the scale. And coincidentally, on like after a rest day where I've done minimal cardio, minimal activity, minimal for me, I end up lighter the following day, always. Okay, because I end up building a little bit of stress throughout the week or what have you. And on those really, really active days, I'm probably holding on to a bit more fluid than normal. Okay, So just because you've done a certain amount of activity on one day doesn't mean that you're going to see the efforts of that activity show up the following day. You just need to be patient because the body doesn't work on a day-to-day basis. It works over a couple of days, a week, a month, that type of thing. So I just wanted to share that bit of information because I know some people freak out when they don't see the scale weight going where they want it to go, despite putting in a lot of effort. Okay. So just remember that you will be rewarded for your effort. It just may not show up immediately. And that's going to be my best advice for that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of emotional relationships with the scale that get in the way of this. It's like you think, all right, I'm dieting, it needs to go down daily, every day, or every time you go on the scale. Well, whatever your cadence is, it needs to go down. Otherwise, there's something wrong. And I think that's the real issue. Where logically, most people probably understand it from a logical perspective. I think it's probably that emotional monster inside is probably thinking, oh, you need to go harder. It's that punishment element of. Yeah, the scale is only there to show it going down, not as a genuine data point. I think it takes a long time to turn it into a genuine data point in your own head.
Yes, agreed.
So until you get to that point, I think it is quite an emotional experience of getting on the scale, and it's like, oh, putting all this work in, doing all this thing, and it's not even showing. The one number that can track it, it's not even showing it to me because I'm not lean enough for the body, for the visuals to show it. So it's my only reference point.
Yeah, agreed. And even things like digestion, right? Like again, if you've missed a bowel movement or something like that, if you haven't had enough water, you've had too much water, maybe you added a bit of extra salt than you normally would, or you went out for a meal, even though the actual portion of the meal was well intentioned, it was the one plate rule, you followed all the guidelines, you still may wake up the following day heavier simply because of other factors that are not you overeating, or you adding on body fat. Anytime you see such an increase in scale weight the following day, it's never body fat. Like it's simply just water retention that is just happened via many mechanisms. Like if you don't sleep enough, if you weigh yourself earlier than normal, again, like I notice huge fluctuations if I don't sleep properly, massively. So it's just stuff like that you got to be aware of. But again, it's knowing how to interpret those numbers to be like, okay, well, I know that this is just me not sleeping enough, and I know it's going to come down because I know that I'm nailing everything. Like I know I'm nailing my nutrition. I know I'm nailing my activity. Therefore, the results will come. They just may not show up today because I've had a shitty sleep or I haven't had a bowel movement. And I think it's getting to that point, I think is hard, and as you said earlier, there's a huge emotional attachment to that. But the key takeaway from that is to, regardless of what that you see, whatever, regardless of what the number is, you still do the work that you should be doing because it will yield the results. It will. We promise you, especially if you're being guided. Now, if you're trying this on your own, I think that makes it 10 times harder, to be fair, because you don't have the accountability. You don't have the objective eye to tell you, hey, you actually are in a deficit. You may think you're in a deficit in your own little brain. So I don't think it works the same. But I think if you have someone in your corner or you have experts in your corner that can help you with this type of thing, man, I just think it takes out a lot of guesswork. Akash, you remember when you were doing your own prep, like it helped having Ed and I and other coaches helping you along the way, right? Because we're all human. We all need that assistance to some degree to help, rationalize what the hell's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me on this.
Yeah. I think just to give some context for others, though,
Yeah, just to give some, just to elaborate on one of your points you mentioned of like, if you think you're in a deficit, but you're actually not. I think there's another interesting relationship where you can think you're in a deficit because you think you're following the plan. And yet you have an objective eye saying to you, you're not in a deficit because you're probably eating out too much and you're not factoring it all in for whatever reasons. And you may be thinking I think a common trap people fall into is they're good for like 1 or 2 days, then off, then good, then off. And again, it's looking at things on a micro basis where on a micro level, they're doing well. But on a macro level, 7 days across, they're in maintenance or worse, in a surplus. And that acceptance can be very difficult because, and that's the worst place to be because you're neither dieting nor maintaining. You're just in that dietary purgatory. And sometimes it just takes that ego to be dropped and accept that you need to change the way you eat when you go out and understand you need weeks and weeks and weeks of consistency, not a couple of days or hours of consistency.
Yeah. And what we've always said, like nailing your nutrition or this whole fat loss game, it's harsh, man. Like I think it's one of the harshest things in the world because with most things, if you give like 80, 85% effort, you're going to get a good result. You know what I mean? But if you're off by 15 to 10% with your nutrition, like if 2 meals out of the week are really, really bad, so when I say bad, I mean just overeating massively, you can literally wipe out your entire deficit. Like done. 1 meal, your deficit is completely done for the whole week. That can be really, really disheartening. And this is why, again, the body doesn't lie, right? What you eat in private, you wear in public. And it's a harsh reality, and yeah, you may not realize. Now, again, like if your scale weight if we go back to the scale weight thing and it hasn't changed, it's fluctuating for like 2 weeks straight and it hasn't been going down, you're not in a deficit. You're not holding water. You're not pooping. You're not dropping body fat because you are overeating somewhere you are, whether you know it or not. And again, I don't think people do it maliciously. I think people maybe forget certain things. They overestimate or they underestimate how much they're eating out.
It's also a lack of awareness of your
habits.
Things add up. Your lack of awareness of habits of like you picking at the kids' food, picking at your own food when you're cooking. That sort of stuff. Like a rule I have, like I'll you know when I'm cooking, because I'm cooking usually just for myself, and sometimes I cook for Channy. But the good thing is, if I pick up that food, it's basically going into my plate anyway. It's just like it's not going to be, and I quite enjoy that. But I know that I'm aware that I'm doing it, but at the same time, I know that I'm just basically eating my dinner early, as opposed to eating other people's.
It's in your budget.
Eating other people's dinner. But I think that's an easy way where you can get subconscious habits of just picking at the food there, picking at your kids' food, you're finishing your kids' foods. I was having a conversation with this another parent the other day, and they were saying that the big reason why they've gained so much weight is they think, this is what they blamed it on the fact that one of the habits that they accumulated was getting a habit of finishing their kids' food. You know, a kid would have a bit of food, especially when they're like 2, 3, 4 years old, where they don't really finish. They just, sometimes they'll eat, sometimes they won't eat. And this one have a few bites, and she just finished the rest of it because she don't want to waste the food. And that's very it happened. You do that enough times, and you probably will. You accumulate a couple thousand calories over the weeks and the months, and pound here, pound there. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. A year later, you're 20 pounds up. I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed anything. All you've changed is you're still going to the gym 3 times a week, still eating your normal meals. You just been eating someone else's meals just along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, okay, then I would just turn it around and go, why are you serving them so much excessive food as well? That's another question to ask. Why is their plate so full?
Well, that's another thing. It's like this is the thing. It's like, I want to feed my kid. There's an emotional thing of like, these people. Because I actually didn't realize how little they eat. So when it comes to
that food so much though.
Yeah. So between 6 and 9 months, you start the weaning process, right? You introduce some solids. And it was me thinking, we were like, what's the first meal going to be? I'm like, hey, I think a good bowl of oats, with us in the morning. And, I'll cook, we'll get 3 pans out. Right now I've got 2 pans, we'll get 3 pans out. Charlie was like, you realize it's going to be like 2 spoons. Oh, really? It means I thought it might just be a smaller version of the bowl, not like just like literally it'd be like a spoon. If you're lucky, it'd be a spoon. If not, it might just be.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, why are they serving so much food? It's like subconsciously they're like, I know my kid's not going to finish this, so I get to finish.
Well, that's another. You know what? That is probably a conversation people are having in their heads, and they'll never admit.